This video is presented to you in true IMAX ratio of 1.43 to 1. And not only that, this is my first time making this kind of video where it's very long. This is meant to be an ultimate guide to how to use IMAX. So this will be a very important video. So sit back and enjoy. Hello and welcome to Unify X Animations. If you are a filmmaker who just came off the success of your first feature film or you're already in the industry as a well-regarded director, you might have taken a glance or two at the large immersive IMAX screen. You want to use it but you aren't sure which format you want to use, this video is for you. It's important to keep in mind that this video is for those who are an animated director or cinematographer, but I will keep this video entertaining enough for those who aren't filmmakers and cinematographers. And we won't be talking about how to make immersive sound as it depends on your direction and the sound designer. I won't be showing biased opinions here so you can decide for yourself. I'll just show the pros and cons of each IMAX format. Hopefully you should leave this video understanding how to use and identify all three IMAX variants. Before we start, you might be asking, why should I put extra effort putting in essentially more pixels on the animation render, which will only get to be viewed on limited IMAX screens across the world? Here's two reasons why. First, immersion. For many, IMAX's signature larger-than-life screens coupled with immersive sound system creates a uniquely immersive experience. The massive screen literally envelops you. Massive objects appear to dominate your entire peripheral vision. Directors like Christopher Nolan have pioneered this format to create unforgettable masterpieces like Interstellar and Oppenheimer. Thanks to his effort, more and more directors are using IMAX to elevate their stories to new heights, an experience that cannot be matched at home. Second, elevating the story. It's more than just adding an extra height to the overall framing. It's about giving the scene significance. Let's use an example here. This one is in the ultra animation ratio of 2.76 to 1. It emphasizes the horizontal space. Now let's expand it. Now it is much taller. It gives more height to the overall scene. When you expand the ratio from the widescreen ratio to this, it emphasizes the importance of this scene in the film, hence elevating the story. But of course, not all stories needs IMAX. Some may be better without it. Staying in the widescreen ratio for the entirety of the film may have even its benefits, while others are elevated by it, using the extra height it gives to elevate the narrative. So it's up to your story which one works. Okay, now that you know why would you animate your film in IMAX, let's look at three different IMAX formats to choose from. This is the first IMAX format we are going to talk about. It views a aspect ratio of 1.43 to 1, which is slightly wider than 1.33 to 1, aka 4:3. This format is captured by passing 65mm film horizontally, hence creating the 1.43 to 1 ratio. But in animation, you can change the aspect ratio by changing the animation resolution to this. Click on the video showing on top right for exact resolution you need. It's often labeled as shot with IMAX film camera or film from IMAX if they count it as digital. More on that later. When you use this format, you'll notice that it is much taller than your usual films shot in wider scope ratio 2.39 to 1 or HDTV ratio 16:9. It is a square format when used expands vertically into 1.43 to 1. So let's start with pros. Despite being wider than 1.33 to 1, it has some similarities to that ratio's composition benefits, like being able to spotlight characters' faces, emphasizing tall objects, but also good for horizontal space when used well, and also great for symmetrical slash central composition. Due to the large film gauge size, special lenses were designed to cover the whole image without vignetting. This also made the depth of field extremely shallow, meaning you can focus on objects that's far away and still render blurry backgrounds while doing so. Compare that to the regular camera, film or sensor, which renders most of the foreground and background in focus. Let me show you. This is a distant shot. This one has Aria Alexa LF with open gate, just like Dune. The lenses used in the camera makes everything in the frame sharply in focus. But when we cut from this to IMAX, you'll notice that it has more shallow depth of field even if the camera is far away. Like I said, the format is very large. Special lenses were created to fit this format. This can be a great advantage if you do use this well. Let me show you an example. This scene here I made using the shallow depth of field that comes with IMAX 1.4321. But obviously, these are just tools. Like all great directors, use either one to enhance your story. However, it does not come with softwares you are likely using, like Krita 2D or Blender 3D. So, the solution is you either try to mimic the shallow depth of field in 2D by using a reference image and then drawing from behind the character, or in 3D, you can set your depth of field to this in Blender. Look at this image. It looks normal, right? Now, let's switch it to this. Now, it certainly feels different aside from the shallow depth of field. That's because the camera used in the first image is 1 inches, which is equivalent to 8mm camera and front-facing camera from your phone. This one here is IMAX 70mm, which is very huge camera. People tend to trust faces with less lens distortion and deem them more trustworthy. But this also allows you to get more of the surroundings without the distortion of the wide angle lens, while also getting the shallow depth of field and distance. To get this wide field, you can do this in softwares like Blender. Now that's all for pros. Now it's time for cons. After it is shown in large IMAX 1.43 to 1 theaters, it is inevitable for a home release, either as a physical Blu-ray or a digital streaming service. If the original ratio is maintained, then black bars are formed from its sides. Unless you intended that way, but however, this was meant for the big screens without any distraction, it immediately sticks out like a sore thumb on a small screen. But there is a solution to this. The solution is to use something called safe area. It's a guideline for each distribution format. Let me show you. As you can see here in this shot, I am framing for 4 different formats. First one is Ultra Panoration 70 2.76 to 1 for ultra wide monitors like Samsung Odyssey G9. Secondly is 2 to 1, which is streaming standard as it was meant to be fit on all devices ranging from tiny phones to the large 70-inch TV. Thirdly is 16:9, which is the full TV aspect ratio, which I don't need to explain. And last, which is true IMAX 1.43 to 1, meant to play in the large screens. Even though I said the benefits of framing with this format a few minutes ago, there is, however, cons to framing with this aspect ratio. Like, for example, we have a large city scene where you want to emphasize the height of these tall buildings. There is a good chance you'll keep your subjects to the bottom of the screen and way below the safe area. While the image is stunning, there will be a problem when transferring to the home release. You will have to force the image to the bottom, which will cut out the majority top half of the image. So keep the home release in mind when framing your shots. For more information on this, see the video showing on top right. Now that I mentioned the pros and cons of this format, you have two choices to how you will use this format. But first, I need to finish the next format before we talk about this. We will circle back to this. Before we start this one, I want to note that Film for IMAX means more than just a specific camera certified by IMAX. It's a whole program where IMAX collaborates with filmmakers to make the experience better in their theaters. So keep this in mind when we get to the third format. This is the second IMAX format we are going to talk about, one that is getting more and more used by modern blockbusters. It wields an aspect ratio of 1.9 to 1, which is slightly wider than 60:9 and flat 1.85 to 1. This is labeled as Film for IMAX. Due to the limited number of IMAX's own film camera, IMAX Corporation decided to certify a select few digital cameras from popular manufacturers, such as these cameras showing right now. So the digital camera used here is certified by IMAX themselves. These digital cameras can either shoot in 1.9 to 1 or in rare cases 1.43 to 1. But let's focus on 1.9 to 1. Since the aspect ratio is similar to 1.85 to 1 flat ratio and 16:9 aka 1.78 to 1, these are usually reserved for films shot in scope 2.39 to 1. Here's the resolution to set your animation render in. So, time for pros. Triangular composition works very well in this aspect ratio, which, like I said, is similar to 1.85 to 1 and 16:9. It can have close-ups without the excessive space of 2.39 to 1 or the tight framing of 1.33 to 1. When expanding from 2.39 to 1 to this, you're able to give extra height to the framing, which is about 35 to 50% of original or 1.43 to 1 ratio. Unlike true IMAX 1.43 to 1, which requires careful framing and definitely needing safe area for each distribution format, since 1.90 to 1 in ratio is similar to 16:9, it fits on smaller 16:9 TVs with minimum black bars on top and bottom, so you have no problem when transferring to the home release with the expanded ratio, like how Captain America Civil War has expanded ratio for select scenes. This means you can still give select scenes significance and not cop for the home release. There are more digital IMAX screens playing the movies in 1.9 to 1 than there are true IMAX screens playing in 1.43 to 1, either as digital or 70mm. The digital IMAX screens is growing more and more in numbers, which allows for more films showing 1.9 to 1 to show it there, which means you can show your film across the world. Now let's do the cons. Despite being able to fit small screens, only few films get a expanded ratio for home release, like Captain America and Hunger Games Catching Fire. It's rare for distribution companies to release their film with the expanded ratio, let alone with 1.43 to 1 ratio at home. They tend to avoid so because they want to keep the experience limited to only IMAX screens. This is because IMAX is a premium brand nowadays. Everyone pays extra to see films in IMAX, with or without the expanding ratio. So the distributor wants to capitalize on IMAX brand, hence potentially giving the home release the smaller ratio that usually plays in regular theater. But consider using safe area if that happens so. Even though the 1.9 to 1 aspect ratio has many compositional benefits, however, the ratio is very short compared to 1.43 to 1. Let's bring an example from earlier. This shot works so well here because you can see how tall these buildings are. But if you attempt to do this shot in 1.9 to 1, it struggles to do the same effect. Even if you move the camera away, it will be very distant, and you won't have the ability to move the camera freely. So it's usually best if you frame it like a 16:9 ratio while alternating from 2.39 to 1 to this. Now, let's get back to where I left off to. You as a filmmaker have two choices if you decide to use either one of these two formats I explained. Each will have its pros and cons. So, the first option is to use it for select scenes. This means shooting the film like normal and then switching it to the taller 1.43 to 1 or 1.9 to 1 IMAX ratio for special moments in the film. Let me do a little demonstration by showing you a scene using this approach. As you can see, using this for special moments brings back a point I made earlier, which is using the IMAX expanded ratio to give scenes significance in the narrative, either as 1.43 to 1 true IMAX ratio or 1.9 to 1 digital IMAX ratio. This option allows you to switch seamlessly from widescreen ratio to IMAX. That, of course, depends on your direction on the production. This option is a bit unique. It's exactly as it sounds, shooting your entire animated film in the IMAX ratio, either as 1.43 to 1 or 1.98 to 1. What makes this uniquely different from the other option is that no film up until now has shot entirely with IMAX film camera. This is due to the fact that these cameras were loud, expensive, and hard to use. However, since we are in animation, which is a place where voice acting and the visuals are worked at different times, so these issues are basically non-existent. This option allows you to make the entire film consistent feeling of grandiose and complete immersion without switching to a smaller format. I don't need to show you an example since most of you have seen my previous video using this approach. Click on the video above. So now let me present you the pros and cons of using these two options. With the first option, these are the pros. If the scene has major importance to the story, you will expand the ratios since there is more information on top and bottom of the frame, which tells the audience subconsciously that this scene is important compared to the rest of the film which is shot normally. Yeah. It's great for alternating between scenes that require a wider ratio and others for taller objects. When transferring to the home release, you don't have to worry about picking an aspect ratio since the smaller format it switches back and forth to provides you a great frame of reference on the smaller screens, which means you can crop the film in that ratio and still have a consistent ratio. That doesn't interrupt the viewing experience at home. And this doesn't mean completely cropping the image, that's for regular cinema screens. You can still have expanded ratio at home by making it fit 16 by 9 screens everyone has at home. For the cons is these below. Since the ratio is changing throughout the film, the audience can notice the aspect ratio changing constantly, which, if not done carefully, can make it distracting for the audience. So try to time the ratio from widescreen ratio to IMAX smooth as possible. When you use the IMAX ratio, these results are unbelievable, but you could run into what I call scope geeks, where they use the expanded ratio in the opposite way, where the scope is used instead of IMAX. This is especially true for indie animation shows like Gaslight District, where they made the ratio that's meant for horizontal space used instead as a crutch to make the quote-unquote cinematic. However, it makes the scene feel small, so use the IMAX ratio to make important scenes have significance in the narrative. And this doesn't mean not using it for action sequence. It just means using it for important moments in the story. If the IMAX footage is used for less than 20 minutes minimum, this gives the distributor a quick excuse to not release the film in IMAX ratio, either 1.43 to 1 or 1.9 to 1, which will waste all the effort put into the IMAX sequence. But don't let this discourage you from using IMAX. This just means using the ratio for entire scene, which can vary in scene duration, which I stated earlier that not all scenes needs IMAX. Just using it on specific genres like action, science fiction, fantasy. I don't mean exactly the genres, but it will give you a good idea of how it is meant to be used. So if you're gonna use it for select scenes, use it for more than 20 minutes. So now it's time for second option. The pros for this one are, since the ratio is not changing between scenes, it has an advantage of making the audience completely immersed in the film while making them not notice the ratio switching. This is great, especially if your goal with the film is immersion. Unlike the previous one, which involves switching the ratio throughout the film, this one stays in the IMAX ratio for the entirety of the film. This means that your distributor will now have an excuse to not release the film in IMAX, no matter the format, digital or true IMAX. There's more for this approach, but that's all I could think of for the pros of this approach. So now, let's do the cons. Even though the film is shot entirely in the IMAX expanded ratio, the problems of home transfer still persist. The issue is not just picking a widescreen ratio like scope 2.39 to 1 or 16 by 9, but panning the image up and down. By that I mean, when editing the film, you as a filmmaker on this animated film has to make at least two different versions of the film minimum, because there are so many different screens with different aspect ratios. So you have to preserve the a important detail either by keeping it in the safe area, which is in the middle of the image, or by panning the image throughout the scene, which can cause multiple parts of the image, which many in the crew such as production designers and animators have hard work will be cut off, thus rendering their hard work as useless. So try to speak with the crew on different formats you are gonna crop in pre-production to prevent their hard work from being wasted. Another issue is that since the whole film is in IMAX expanded ratio, depending on the format you choose, which is 1.43 to 1 or 1.9 to 1, if you choose 1.43 to 1, the experience is limited to few true IMAX theaters. Once this theatrical run is over, that will be the last of the animated film with the expanded ratio. Unless they release it on its anniversary, there's no way for your audience to view the intended format, let alone in theaters again. And for 1.9 to 1, like I said, relies heavily on your distributor willing to release it with the expanded ratio for home release. If you use this approach for small-scale stories like romance or drama, it wouldn't make sense since the format was designed for stories with large scope than your traditional stories like sitcom. But of course, films like Lawrence Arabia has huge scope in terms of stories, and it still has the drama, a great drama that too. Even though film used the regular 5 70 millimeter film, it is a great example of using this format for dramas like this. So if you're gonna use this approach of showing the entire film in IMAX expanded ratio, if the story requires it, then use it. Otherwise, use the regular ratio. Examples like action, thriller, science fiction, etc. But that's all I could think of. There's more, but that's the idea. That's all for the cons. If you're serious about using IMAX in your animated film, either as 1.43 to 1 or 1.9 to 1, these two options present you some challenges, but it is your job to make it count. However, many animation studios don't use the expanded ratio. They instead use this next format we are going to talk about, or should I say, process. This third one is rather a post-production process where they take a completed animated film and remaster it to fit the screen and sound system. They also perform the remaster on the audio as well, but we'll focus on the visual remastering. This is done by using their proprietary tools to remove film grain, increase sharpness, have more contrast and saturation, improving bass effects for the sound, and in some cases, expanding the ratio. We'll get back to the last one. This process is part of IMAX's own Film for IMAX program, where they collaborate with filmmakers on the film. The film can be either in scope 2.3921 or regular 16 by 9, but not always. They take the completed animation and perform some of the things I mentioned earlier. If the film is done through this process, on the poster it's going to be called Experience It in IMAX rather than Shot with IMAX or Film for IMAX. This approach is used almost by all Hollywood-produced projects, animation or live action. They shoot or animate their films normally without the special gear or the cameras IMAX certified or made themselves. Then IMAX collaborates with those filmmakers and cinematographers of those films to ensure the final image looks good, enhance the image, and while in the process, staying true to the vision and intention of the filmmaker. If you are going to be directing a studio produced animated film without the expanded ratio, it is almost guaranteed that your film will be showing in one of IMAX's regular theaters, so you have to be there to supervise the process. Notice that I said earlier that this process has indeed have a expanding ratio. That's because during the remastering process, the remastering team would normally crop the whole film to fit the 1.9 to 1 or 1.43 to 1 screens to avoid having noticeable black bars on top and bottom. This is of course done with the director supervising, but the information of the image is lost. So they use something called open matte, where in the past they shoot the whole film in 4:3 ratio and then have the film soft matted to match the ratio they intended for the cinema screens. After its theatrical run is over, they would use the extra height of the image to fit the home's 4:3 screens. However, it is different here. The filmmakers who use the expanded frame usually use it for VFX works, even in the digital age. The IMAX digital remastering team would use this extra height if permitted by the filmmaker to fit the large 1.9 to 1 screens. Now that you understand what is this process, let's get into pros and cons of this format or aka process. Since its purpose is to improve quality and enhance the image, this is great when you have placed in specific detail for subtle reasons, and also when you have a silhouette shot of the character against golden hour sky. It can get ruined by the lack of contrast and saturation of the regular digital cinema projectors. So this is where the remastering process for the IMAX showings comes in. They collaborate with the director to make the imagery proper and match his vision and intentions on the big screen. Note that this is for the IMAX screens and not for the home release, which we will get into later. After its IMAX remastering process is done, depending on if you use OpenGate or not, the film will not have any aspect ratio switching, which can benefit it from not distracting the audience. This, of course, depends on if you either letterbox or crop the film, which has their own disadvantages. And if you do use your own OpenGate footage, depending on how much of the film you shot, it will still have all the benefits of regular IMAX short film. If done right, the image and the audio enhance properly with your supervision. The experience is truly amazing with its surround sound system. So if you're going to use regular scope of 2.3921 or 16 by 9 and get it remastered by IMAX's remastering team, there are a couple of disadvantages to consider. The whole remastering process is only there to make the film fit the 1.9 to 1 screens and the sound system. So this means after its IMAX showings are done, they are not going to use that remastered footage for the home release, but the original version. So let's say if you're making the film specifically for the remastering process, so you set it up with the low contrast or also known as vlog format to aid with the process, and where you crop or letterbox the film. Whatever you intended or not, that original footage, which is the original log image, will be used instead as the footage for the home release, which can ruin your vision for the project. So try to keep the both home release and as well as the IMAX and regular theatrical experience in mind when making the film with your intended contrast and saturation, which are crucial to the story. Since it has no expanded ratio, you aren't able to give scenes significance that are important to the story. Even if you use open matter, you might as well make your whole film officially labeled as shot for IMAX or film for IMAX. What's worse is that if you crop the film during the remaster process, you lose essential information that you and your team have worked so hard on. So if you're going to give scenes significance, then use the format I mentioned earlier with the option film for IMAX scenes approach. Note that using OpenMat versus using the actual IMAX expanded ratio is basically the same thing, but the only difference is that is the intentions. The one with the open gate is that when you're trying to make the screens not crop or letterbox the image in the IMAX 1.9 to 1, but you didn't intend it to be viewed in that ratio. And the one that says film for IMAX, that's the one where you actually intended to be viewed in that ratio. Many of the IMAX's digital theaters that's integrated into regular theaters are much smaller than the larger normal 1.9 to 1 screens or the massive 1.43 to 1 GT screens. The screen may be close to the size of a regular theater one. After the remaster process, there's a chance that your film may not have not too much of a difference. This combined with the smaller IMAX size screen size causes people to accuse both the company and you, the filmmaker, for trying to profit off the brand, since the ticket price, no matter the format, is pretty high, which is almost exactly like the regular 1.43 to 1 slash 1.9 to 1 screening prices. So if they see that your film looks almost exactly like the normal version, they will complain about it. So if you're going to use IMAX, then use the IMAX ratio, either to film select scenes or shoot entirely with it. And if you don't want to, it's alright. This format isn't for everyone, and in some cases, it won't fit the story. There we go. The three IMAX formats you can use for your animated film. But there is one thing that matters, no matter the format you choose, and that is your distributor. If the distribution company is a local one, then it will be difficult for your film to be shown across the world with the IMAX format release. This is why after the success of your first feature film, you will have the freedom to use either of these IMAX format. And if you do use IMAX, do it in a way that fits the story, as the story is the most important thing to a film. If the story is poorly written, it doesn't matter if you played it on the large 1.43 to 1 IMAX screens or the tiny phones. It will be still terrible. So if your story is great, using IMAX will enhance the experience of the story. So going back to the question, what is the correct way to use IMAX in an animated film? Well, the answer lies in the story. If the story requires it, use it. If the story doesn't require it, then don't use it. Ultimately, the answer ultimately lands in your hands as a filmmaker. So use it well, and you might get something great out of it. Hey, this is Unified X here after recording the whole video. It took about 4 to 5 months since August. While I was still making the Blade Runner inspired city scene, it took me a long time. At first I thought it was gonna take 2 months, but then I realized it's gonna take a lot more time. That's why this video took so long, and is probably the reason why it is this long. But hey, if you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and subscribe if you want to see more video. I'm working on a new short film. I'm giving another chance at it. Here's a little teaser at the script. While making this video, I was making lots of image renders, both from Blender, and not just that, also the animation render to fully help with what I'm trying to say. Try to fully visually manifest. You know what I mean. But anyway, see you later, and see you after a long time again. Bye.